Beginning of turn 35 and a most dangerous time under my special little rules. The Mori have begun their siege of sort of the chief temple, Ishiyama. If they take that, then they're able to play the Ikuiki Truce if they have it, which doesn't completely eliminate the Ikuiki, but it definitely weakens them. They no longer can recuperate their losses. They can only revolt. Meanwhile, Takeda are continuing their advance. The Sugi moved into place, but they didn't have. They need a big roll to attack Mount High because of the extra way space in between. With a big force facing them, they have to bring significant forces through, and that's going to be tough. They may need to play a force march to get there. That's it. Here we are in turn 38. Not a lot's happened since last time. But until now, which is why I'm on it. The siege of the Ikuiki has, they're definitely running down in troops, but a lot of Mori had to be committed and a lot were killed. You can see some of the death there, but the Usugi finally managed to make it to Mount High, and they attacked. Now, it ended up being both a surprise attack and an ambush, which just cancels itself out. So they fought it out. They defeated whoever's there. I believe it was Takagi, who was there. And he withdrew, but he left a couple forces behind, a couple units behind, to hold it in a siege. And one of them died. One of them's still there, so it's going to slow things up a little bit. The Mori were defeated by an Ikuiki attack at Kyoto, which is actually quite remarkable because with the daimyo and with the leader with the bravery bonus, it seemed really unlikely the Ikuiki would ever get a shot in, but this was kind of a last gasp by them to try to save things for themselves. At this point, and they destroyed most of a huge army, as well as killing one of their daimyo. At this point, it's beginning to look like there might be some kind of brokered truce. Everybody might be willing to accept nobody winning. Along the lines of make Sakai Magochi or Sakamagochi the shogun, but with leaving all three clans in a fairly powerful position. The Mori at this point, facing both the Usugi and the Takeda, are not at all happy with their position. The Takeda, a lot of their strength comes from the Ikuiki and that agreement, and if they tried to seize the shogunate, they would end up with the Ikuiki against them. And likewise, the Usugi just don't feel like they can necessarily defeat the Takeda, leaving things up in the open, as it were. Because if the Mori basically said, we withdraw, I don't think, unless somebody objected to that, unless one of the other two clans directly objected, that there would be a problem. It may play out the turn before I make that decision, though. Alright. I'm going to call it here under the terms I just discussed. The turn finished. I think that's what's reasonable at this point. The Mori know they cannot win. On the other hand, they can use their bargaining position at this point to still say, look, let's end this war. Is that realistic? I don't know enough about the history of the time period to really say. Anyway, that's the feeling. The situation I ended up in the game was a stalemate. The Mori would have been able to get a minor victory had they not tried to grab for more. But clearly the Ikuiki are the winners in this one. What do I think of the game? Component-wise, it's nice, but there are problems with the counter sheet. The map is beautiful. There's problems with the counter sheet in terms of just some minor things, pieces that the errata says you don't need, some printing that looks like it was done kind of in error in terms of the thing on the back isn't what you'd expect to necessarily be there. This is especially the case with the besieged and the unsupplied markers. I've already said the rules are terrible. I do not like the glossy rule book and the kind of informal style. This reminds me again of Games Workshop and a number of other things. Yeah, this is really, really popular in light games. This isn't that heavy a game, but this rule book has made it infinitely harder to try to understand what the rules actually are. You could probably do this game in 8 pages with a good, clear, case-by-case referenced rule book. It would be much, much easier for the player to read, much easier to deal with. There'd be room for some historical notes where you wouldn't have to put them on cards, which I have to say, it's just not pleasant. I mean, I don't want to shuffle through cards and try to read them. The player aid cards, these suck. Not for the information on them, that's great, but they're tiny, tiny print. Give me something that's a full sheet of paper like every other game has used. I mean, you know, somebody must have, I don't know if these are made for, you know, but a lot of our hobby is aging, and we don't have great eyesight. And I mean, mine isn't bad yet, but it's going to be there. But I mean, you just don't count on people being able to read stuff that tiny. That's not a usable function. However, I think it's a really, really cool game. Fairly light, actually very light. It feels almost, you know, I mean, it doesn't feel too different from something like Axis and Allies, although there's definitely a little bit more roll to it. The fact that I could get to the end of it and be able to extend it and do so nicely, to me that means it's a cool game. I like that about the game, and I think I'm going to do a video on extending games and what I like about that at some point. Overall, I'm torn between a 7 and an 8 on this. I mean, it definitely does not deserve any less than that. I think the cruddy rules are going to drop it down to a 7, although there's a rat online and whatever. But it's hard to tell. It's really a nice game. If only there were good, clean multiplayer rules of a nature that allowed people to be negotiating and cutting deals. I hear one of the developer of it actually is involved in something that was going to be sort of an Empires in Arms of this period. I'm afraid of what the rules might look like. I hope they're not glossy, and I hope, you know. But if, I mean, that's almost a grail for me for the period. I would love that. I would love it a lot. Unfortunately, I think it's been canceled. Didn't get enough pre-orders. But maybe it'll make a rebirth, because apparently it's been kicking around since the 80s. I would definitely recommend this, but I would say you're going to have to spend a lot of effort to push through these rules and understand what you're doing. I haven't looked at the living rules that are posted on Board Game Geek. They might be a lot better. I don't know. Take a look at them. If they make sense, if you read them and you just sort of understand the game, because that's what I expect. I expect to understand the game after reading the rules. Not everything about it, but the basic idea of it. And I did not have that with this at all. And then there were a lot of little points I had to go back for.